Hello and welcome to this video on family diversity, the modernist perspectives. In light of changing family patterns and demographic changes, as discussed previously, this has led to increased family diversity in the UK. We have lots of different types of families, whereas in the past perhaps this wasn't always the case. We now have less nuclear families, more single-person households, more couples, both straight and gay, living together, which is cohabitation, and also more children born out of marriage. So things are changing. We have family diversity. We need now to understand how sociologists categorize these changes and the meanings behind these changes. And we're going to find that different sociologists have different views on this process. The first set of perspectives we're going to consider are modernist in nature. And this is very much that they are born out of the experience of the 20th century. Functionalism, in particular, is very much a modernist perspective, as is the neoliberal New Right perspective. Both these perspectives see society as being highly structured and organised, and as a result, predictable in the way it operates and the outcomes it achieves. They believe there is one best type of family, namely the nuclear family, which is a mother and a father married with children. That relationship has to be heterosexual, which helps maintain society's structure and performs essential functions. So that family structure is doing very important things, and it's doing them in the best, most optimal way for society's needs. Starting with the functionalist perspective, we need to consider the work of Talcott Parsons. Talcott Parsons argued that the functional fit of the family to society is very important. That is to say that the nuclear family performs certain functions and it fits the needs of modern society. The nuclear family is therefore uniquely suited to meet the demands of a geographically and socially mobile workforce. So we find that within modernist economies, people need to move around for jobs, and the nuclear family is very good at being able to move around the country, say like the UK, because it's very small and easy to pick up and move around. But also socially mobile, because changes in how our economy works and how our society works means that we now live in a more meritocratic society, and people are able to move up the social classes as they work harder and achieve more and ultimately earn more money. The nuclear family are also able to perform the two irreducible functions that functionalists consider to be very important, namely primary socialisation of children, so teaching children norms and values they need to engage in wider society, and also stabilisation of adult personalities. Mum and dad support each other, they engage in a monogamous sexual relationship with each other, and if they have stresses or worries or concerns, they help each other through those. Parsons believes we can generalise about the family type we will find in a modernist society, namely the nuclear family with a clear division of labour. That's mum and dad doing different roles. Mum doing the expressive role, raising children, cooking, cleaning, looking after the home. Dad doing the instrumental role, being the breadwinner, earning money to provide for the family's financial needs. Other types of family, Parsons would argue, should therefore be seen as deviant. That is, they are going against the norm. They are deviating from what is normal. And unproductive. That is, they are not meeting the needs of all the members of the family group, but also society at large. As a result, they're less able to perform those key functions required of the family and are therefore undesirable. The neoliberal New Right approach to family diversity is very similar from the functionalist perspective, with some slight differences. That is to say, their sort of justifications for their ideas are slightly different. The neoliberal New Right perspective is conservative, that is, it's anti-change generally, or if change does come about, it needs to happen slowly and organically. They try to preserve traditions and hark back to the past. They generally also take an anti-feminist approach, that is to say that anything that might challenge the status quo of the nuclear family and that highly structured relationship between men and women should be seen as problematic, and as feminism does fundamentally question those setups, those structures, it's problematic for the neoliberal New Right approach. Therefore, they are firmly opposed to family diversity. They believe the nuclear family is the only correct family type. They believe that this is natural, that it's based on fundamental biological differences between men and women, that men, because they are physically stronger, should be going out and being the breadwinner. Women, because they are able to bear children, should be the homemaker. They argue that the decline of the nuclear family is the cause of many social problems. So, for example, lone mothers, we've seen an increasing number of single-parent households, and in particular headed by a single mother, are unable to socialise children correctly. The neoliberal New Right would argue that, in particular, a lack of male role models for boys, if dad's not around, causes problems. Those boys might perhaps be disruptive in school, or may begin to engage in antisocial behaviour. They also are concerned, that is the neoliberal new right, that these single parent families are creating welfare dependency, that people are becoming reliant upon state handouts. Two sociologists we need to be aware of here. Firstly, Benson argued that cohabiting couples are more likely to separate after having a child than married couples. So he did some research there, and there seems to be this idea that if a couple get married, they're more likely to stick together if there are problems and work them through, if they have children, whereas perhaps if the couple isn't married, they're more likely to split and go separate ways. Amato, in the same year, also found that children in a nuclear family are less likely to experience poverty, educational failure, engage in crime, or have health problems. So we have those kind of social issues there. And it could be this idea that, again, because you've got a division of labour, dad going out and earning, providing for the whole family, it's a more stable, structured approach to family organisation. And so perhaps that's why children are less likely to struggle or suffer from some of these more negative behaviours. Conservatives and the neoliberal new right believe welfare benefits have a negative impact on society. So this is that safety net that we have in society, so that if individuals do struggle for one reason or another, there's money provided and so on and so forth to help them get back on their feet. For conservatives and neoliberal new right, they see this as a negative thing. They believe that actually it leads to a loss of traditional values that you would have found in a more structured nuclear family setup, where people need to provide for themselves. And perhaps, if there isn't a safety net, families are more likely to stick together to be able to provide for each other. They believe it creates a perverse incentive. That is to say that almost because these benefits exist, some people may actively go out of their way to try and get hold of them, and they may not, for example, try to work, or they may, for example, not try to save, or they may, for example, not seek to try and rebuild a relationship if it's got into a difficult patch, because they feel, well, ultimately the state will look after me. So it's almost a perverse incentive to engage in certain behaviours which are undesirable, leading to a dependency culture. That is, people being reliant upon the state and reliant upon government handouts rather than providing for themselves. As you can imagine, there are a number of key criticisms of the neoliberal new right perspective, and some of these apply also to the functionalist perspective too. The neoliberal new right view that marriage equals commitment has been challenged. For many, cohabitation is seen as a permanent alternative to marriage. There's nothing necessarily to say that because you've got married or you've not got married that you're not committed to your partner and that relationship is going to last or not last. We know that we have very high divorce rates, for example, in the UK, so marriage isn't always a permanent setup. Anna Oakley, very famous feminist, argues it is wrong to assume that husbands and wives have roles which are biologically fixed. Increasingly, for example, we're finding that many women, as they earn more, may even get to the point where they out-earn their partners. And so the decision may be made that, say, for example, if a child comes along, that dad's going to stay at home, be it stay-at-home dad, and provide for the children. So it's not always those super fixed kind of traditional views of how or what role people should be doing still apply today. Things have changed. So the traditional nuclear family benefits men more than women, feminists would also argue, because it's a form of patriarchal oppression. Generally, it means that men are the ones earning money, they're making the decisions about how the money is spent, they're making decisions about who gets what resources in the home. They may, for example, be limiting the amount of money they give to their children or to their wives to provide for the family. So it's a power play, and for feminists, that would be a particular issue. There's also little or no evidence that lone parents are part of a dependency culture. Many lone parents are very successful, raise their children adequately, correctly, and those children go on to do very, very well, and may even go on to get married themselves. It's not necessarily part of a kind of heirloom system whereby every single parent will lead to more children having been single parents and so on and so forth. It varies from generation to generation. A different approach to consider is Robert Chester's neo-conventional family approach. He argues or recognises that by the early 1980s there had been an increase in family diversity, but unlike the neoliberal new right or functionalist, he did not necessarily see this as a significant thing or issue, or even see this as a negative thing or issue in society. He suggests that actually what's happened is we've just seen a very small shift away from nuclear families to what he calls neo-conventional families or new normal families. In terms of what a neo-conventional family is, it's a dual earner cohabiting family, aka the symmetrical family as we looked at previously. Now, a dual earner, that means both mum and dad are both earning, they're cohabiting, so they're living together, and they may or may not be married. It's not necessary for them to be married, but they have children. So maybe that's the small shift. Marriage not so much on the menu anymore, but people still living together, having children, and now both earning. The nuclear family, however, he argues, remains an ideal for many people. Many people still want it, and often when children are first being socialised, in their sort of early views of where perhaps their lives may go, they hope for the nuclear family. Most people, he even argues, will be part of a nuclear family at some point in their lives, whether they're born into it, whether over a period of time mum and dad gets married, if they were cohabiting, or perhaps they go on to have their own nuclear family later in life. So we're still touching nuclear families, just not necessarily living in them our whole lives. And he also argues that most people still either marry or want to marry, have children or want to have children. Most people still want to meet that partner that they're going to stay together with till death. Most people still want to jointly register births. Most people still want to live in a household with them as a married couple or with a married couple as a child, and then thinking about the parents. So what we've got there is a small shift, but perhaps not a dramatic shift in terms of family diversity. The Rappaports were two very important sociologists, did a lot of work on family diversity. And unlike Chester, Robert and Rona argued that diversity is of central importance in understanding family life today. So rather than it be not important, they say it's very important. They say that we've definitively moved away from the nuclear family, that cultures and lifestyles are now far more diverse in our society. And we can think back to when we looked at demography and all the different groups of people who are coming and settling in the UK now, and how that's fundamentally challenged family life in our society and what families look like. They believed it actually showed a very positive thing, that people now have more freedom and choice, that there's not necessarily a right type of family, that people find the family type which is right for them. Rona even went on to do some more research and found that it wasn't just a UK trend, but it was actually a European trend or even a Western trend, that family diversity is becoming increasingly normal. The Rappaports identify 5 key types of family diversity. So firstly, we've got organisational diversity, differences in the ways family roles are organised. So who does what in the family? Is it a very traditional setup, or is it perhaps not so traditional? Do we find that perhaps other members of the family perform different roles? So organisational diversity is one type of diversity they identify. Secondly, cultural diversity. We now have obviously lots of different cultures, ethnicities and religious groups in our society, and those things may influence how they organise their families. Thirdly, we have social class diversity. Differences in family structure are sometimes apparent between different social classes. So depending on how much income's coming into the family, that might impact the type of structure of the family you might see. So there may be different child rearing practices between the working classes and the middle classes. Perhaps in the working class, mum's more likely to stay at home and bring up the children. In the middle classes, perhaps they're more likely to spend some money for a nanny or for an au pair and to send the children to some sort of daycare. Next, life cycle diversity. Depending on where you are in your life cycle, that is how old you are, what part or phase of life you're in, you may live in different types of families. And a family that was good for you in perhaps your teens or 20s may be very different from what you need in your 50s and 60s, for example. Next, generational diversity. Older and younger generations have different attitudes and experiences that reflect the historical period through which they have lived. And so, when there are big historical moments or big changes in society, that's going to impact the types of families that people live in. And, family diversity or family structures are clearly not fixed. They are changing. They have changed from the past. They will continue to change. In terms of a summary of the modernist perspective of the family, we need to remember, in terms of all modernist perspectives, they believe that modern society is fixed and predictable. It's highly structured, highly organised, and therefore predictable. They say there's one type of family which is the best type of family, namely the nuclear family. And to an extent, therefore, because society is so structured, individuals have no real choice. Now, as we've started to see with Chester and the Rappaports, that's towards the end of kind of the modernist period, they begin to challenge that idea and say, actually, maybe we are moving towards family diversity. Perhaps there isn't an ideal family type. In the next video, we're going to consider postmodernist perspectives. This is that next phase of history, which are going to fundamentally challenge modernist views. What's going to be argued here is that we now live in a postmodern society which is chaotic and unpredictable. So it's no longer structured and organised, it's more chaotic and therefore unpredictable. Family structures are, as a result, going to be more fragmented, that's split up, and diverse, different. People have more freedom and choice. And so you can hear in that language echoes of what the Rappaports were talking about. That's it. Thank you very much.